Well, hello there, and thank you for joining me for the latest edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. On this week's show, we have several recent items from the latest municipal council meetings held in Port Hawkesbury and Richmond County. Among other things, you're going to get local municipal leaders' reaction to the scrapping of the Coastal Protection Act by the province. You're also going to hear how Richmond Council has agreed to provide Richmond District RCMP with data collected from the mobile speed radar signs that have been placed in different parts of the county over the years. And you're also going to get an update on the upgrades that are coming to Destination Reeves Street, the pilot project that has totally revamped Port Hawkesbury's main thoroughfare over the past 5 years. And our feature interview this week is with a man who ran for the Conservative Party of Canada in the riding of Cape Breton-Antigonish in 2015, and who now wants the nomination for the new riding of Cape Breton-Antigonish, Adam Rodgers. And at the end of the show, we'll give another installment of our infamous Fast Five game here on Telile 24/7. But to kick things off, we have an update for you on progress towards a joint public council meeting between Richmond County and Port Hawkesbury. An agenda is coming together for that meeting, and it's expected to be hammered out in the coming days. However, a town councillor from Port Hawkesbury, Jason O'Coin, is not happy that funding formulas for the Strait Area Pool have been left off that agenda. So, as you're about to hear, Councillor O'Coin has asked town staff to look into the possibility of raising the fees that are charged to people from outside of Port Hawkesbury who use the Strait Area Pool. Here is Councillor Jason O'Coin explaining why he feels the way he does.
The Warden of Richmond County says that there's no way that they will be putting the Strait Area Pool on any agenda in the near future for a joint council meeting. So I asked council tonight to consider asking staff to come up with a formula to create an out-of-town resident rate for the use of the Strait Area Pool. It's a little disheartening to hear the response from Richmond County. They want to meet with us, they want to talk about the things that we're doing well together. And as community leaders, if we can't sit down at a table and talk to each other with some hard discussion, some tough discussions, then I think we're doing a misjust to our residents and to the surrounding municipalities. This has been an ongoing issue for many, many years. And just so everybody knows, in the last number of years, both municipalities surrounding us have dropped their contribution in dollar figures for the Strait Area Pool. As the pool is getting busier, and more residents from outside of the town using the pool. So I'll put a motion on the table asking council to direct staff to come up with a formula in the next 2 weeks and bring it to the Committee of Whole as a suggestion of an out-of-town resident rate.
I don't see any reason why we can't have a meeting with Richmond Council. I don't know what the hold-up is on it, but whether it should be public or in camera, because it is contractual and monetary, so I understand that. And, I believe we talked about this for many years, as Councillor McDougall could probably tell you. And it would be nice to have consensus even from Inverness County to talk about the pool, and maybe having a committee jointly to operate the pool and maybe share the expenses.
What we can do is come with options that you may wish to consider, and we'll certainly be prepared for that in Committee of Whole if it's the wish of council.
I think what I would like to do is probably hear some of the information that staff bring forward in terms of what that potentially could look like, and I guess some check marks for me would be what does a formula look like that can create more equity for the residents of the town of Port Hawkesbury, who are footing more of the operational cost of the pool than perhaps other contributions that are coming from other municipalities. But also, I don't want to see the lack of equity get passed on in the other direction. So if there are some contributions that are coming forward from some municipalities and not from others, I guess I would be interested in seeing, what could it look like? Is it a flat non-resident rate? But that doesn't take into account that we do have some contributions coming forward from some neighboring municipalities, but not from others. So I did, point that out to our Chief Finance Officer, Erin McCacken, and I have left that in her capable hands to consider. But to Councillor Coyne's point, it's about getting to a place of better equity with regard to that regional asset. So hopefully there is a future solution so that everyone obviously appreciates that asset. It contributes in such wonderful ways that we might not even be able to articulate in terms of, the safety of living in a coastal community, the life-saving skills, the opportunity to use the pool for rehabilitation for some folks with health challenges. There is of course a long list from swim teams to sports to athleticism and training. So yeah, it's an important asset.
The senior aerobics is one of our biggest classes. I was very surprised to hear that Port Hawkesbury seniors use it very little compared to surrounding municipalities. And our memberships are the same, much smaller in Port Hawkesbury as opposed to Inverness County and Richmond County.
There's no easy fix, I guess. We have to have, some conversations about what that could look like. I think first and foremost, it starts with communication. It starts with data, and let's look at the data. And maybe it's, speaking to some of our other neighboring municipalities who also have users, at the pool as well. And, the last thing that I want to see happen is having that variable cost for pool usership, and at a time where our pool is actually growing. I wouldn't want to see that, reverse the growth of the pool. So I hope that we can come up with a solution that everyone every municipality who does have some of their constituents that are using the pool, I guess at the end of the day, we're all just going to have that conversation and an open dialogue.
I want to make it clear that this is not to punish anybody. This is not an attempt to try to close the pool. This is to bring to light how important the pool actually is to the region. And my goal behind this is just to try to equal the playing field a little bit. I do realize it is in Port Hawkesbury, and right now the town of Port Hawkesbury runs that pool. But I look at it as if this pool was in a different municipality and we were 30+% of the user. I would strongly suggest that our council would support it financially more than 2 or 3% or 10%. So in closing, it's a very, very important asset regionally.
It has been a historical issue that this council has inherited from past councils, and similarly to our neighbors in Richmond and Inverness. They've also inherited, the opportunity, I guess, to change that historical trend. So we do have that opportunity, hopefully, to have those conversations, and hopefully we can come out with a positive solution, as I said before, where everyone feels comfortable with that.
So now that it's clear that the Strait Area Pool won't be on the agenda for the joint public meeting being set up between Port Hawkesbury and Richmond County, what is going to be on the agenda? According to Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, a draft agenda should be finalized for councillors to peruse at the Committee of the Whole meeting taking place later this month.
We don't have anything set in stone. Hopefully by our Committee of the Whole, we'll have an agenda that's been agreed upon by both of our municipalities, so definitely looking forward to that.
Now, as Richmond County and the town of Port Hawkesbury continue to work on the agenda for their joint public council meeting, one area in which they are sharing some common ground is disappointment at the Nova Scotia government's decision to scrap the Coastal Protection Act. The legislation received all-party approval 5 years ago. However, on February 25th, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, John Lohr, and the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Timothy Hallman, held a joint press conference in which they announced that the province would no longer push for the Coastal Protection Act to become law. Instead, the two ministers and their government are leaving it up to municipal units to police coastal protection on their own, while being assisted by a new series of maps put together by the province for this purpose. How do Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and Warden Amanda Mumberket of Richmond County feel about these changes? You're going to hear from the two of them right now.
Our Deputy Mayor, Mark McIver, is going to be joining the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities will be hosting a kind of a Zoom meeting tomorrow evening for on this topic, so that they can hear from like all the mayors and wardens and deputy mayors and deputy wardens and CAOs from all across the province. And then we'll probably have that conversation at Committee of the Whole.
It's pretty fresh information. I will say that I'm a little disappointed that there is not going to be like a consistent province-wide approach. That being said, we do have a provincial organization, NSFM, the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, and I know that we'll be working with them to look at the documents that were published today more closely, and hopefully to come up with some consistency across. Because I mean, really, the municipalities, and I wrote to the minister on this in the past, we were really concerned that the Coastal Protection Act regulations were going to be, the enforcement of them were going to be downloaded onto municipalities where, we would not have the financial nor the resources nor the expertise to be able to effectively administer them. So it was a big concern for us. We felt that it was provincial legislation and should be kind of, regulated and enforced as such. That being said, we're not in favor of coastal protection. We recognize Richmond County in particular has coastlines in both the inland sea of the Bredor Lake and the Atlantic Ocean. So there's a lot at stake for our residents. So just needing a little bit more time to kind of look at that, but definitely we'll be coordinating with NSFM on that as well.
Certainly, we would have some concern on the enforcement side. So I mean, if that if this is going to be a responsibility that gets downloaded onto municipalities, then we want to make sure we understand fully what that impact is going to mean for us. It may be a little different in our town versus in a regional municipality or a rural municipality, of course, but I feel like we're going to get a lot more understanding as a result of that call tomorrow evening. And we'll probably have much more fulsome conversation as well at our Committee of the Whole on that topic.
It's been nearly 5 years since the Destination Reeves Street project took shape in the town of Port Hawkesbury. The joint project between the town and Nova Scotia's Public Works Department has seen the reduction of the previous lane alignment from 4 lanes down to 3, with strategic turning lanes near entrance and exit points that have already existed along Reeves Street and some new ones that have been put in as well. Well, you're going to see some more changes to Port Hawkesbury's main thoroughfare over the next 6 months. We got an update on these changes from the CAO for the town of Port Hawkesbury, Terry Doyle, as he addressed the latest regular meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council on March the 5th. However, Doyle also had an update on a meeting that was held just a few days earlier between the town and several public works officials. And the CAO is hoping to get those officials to come visit a Port Hawkesbury Town Council session in the future to provide a final report on the pilot project stage of Destination Reeves Street and to take in town concerns that have been raised during a survey of its residents. You're going to hear about all of that and get reaction from Port Hawkesbury's Mayor, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, as well as the town's Deputy Mayor, Mark McIver. First, let's take you to the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre's Shannon studio and hear from CAO Terry Doyle.
We spent several hours. We were there. We met for a good part of the day. We went through, if you remember, Jason McMillan summarized a number of points, or all of the concerns that were raised that we sent off to them.
Dwayne Cross is now the manager of highway planning design. Mark Brace is access management engineer. Paul Colton is the district director for the Eastern region. And Brad Harrison is our new area manager. We also had Greg O'Brien. Greg O'Brien is a senior traffic engineer from WSP Consulting. So he's been working on our active transportation planning and design for since 2017. So they've all been familiar with this project, actually. We work with their staff, with the public works staff, and we've identified areas where we can make further improvements at intersections and at crosswalks and signage and a number of things that are going to help make things work even better. So that's what we're concentrating on. We sent that list a list of those concerns off quite some time ago, and now they've reviewed it. They came back to us. We had significant discussions on ways to approach that, and now we're coming around to design solutions and commitments on certain things that'll happen this spring, and certain things that'll happen in the longer term around another major change to Reeves Street.
Bigger issues like the change to traffic lights, changes to curbs, to realign lining and markings at intersections will occur with that. Progress has been made on that as well. So we have it's called a functional plan going forward to them for those changes.
In the aftermath of last Friday's meeting between Port Hawkesbury municipal staff and members of the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works, Port Hawkesbury CAO Terry Doyle is hoping to secure a visit to Town Council by two of the key members of the Nova Scotia Public Works staff that are looking after the Destination Reeves Street project. The CAO is hoping that such a visit would help to determine the future of the Destination Reeves Street initiative, but also to answer several concerns raised by town residents who were surveyed by town staff about the project last summer.
I've also asked for Dwayne Cross and Mark Brace to come to council and present to council and get feedback from council before anything is finalized. We also discussed the study as well, the document, the report, and they said they're prepared to complete that. I don't have a date for that, but that should be coming relatively shortly.
I'm really interested in the presentation that Nova Scotia Public Works will be bringing forward to council when they're so prepared to do that presentation for us. And, also really interested in having the pilot project and the end result determined, particularly so because we have an active transportation project that kind of depends on whether or not we're going to have that extra real estate on the side of the Reeves Street to be able to incorporate similar active transportation infrastructure that citizens and visitors to Port Hawkesbury see from Pitt Street Extension all the way down to the entryway to the Nova Scotia Community College and Nautical Institute. So we're definitely looking forward to progress and seeing both projects completed.
So the survey will be one part of that. So that's the public opinion piece of that. The other is we know there's deficiencies. We've identified them ourselves, and there's things that have to be corrected. So there's those issues. There's report on accidents. what the statistics say about the performance of the road and on speeds and a number of things. So that's the report that the province has indicated that that would be completed, and we still don't have that. There's been a number of staff changes there over that period of time, but they now have staff in place to complete that, and there's a commitment that they'll bring that forward.
I look forward to the presentation. I guess one of the biggest questions is, I know that wasn't mentioned by Mr. Doyle, was the McSween Street entrance onto Reeves, and for the Pitt Street extension. And I know this has been going on for 8 years now, I guess, since we started this. And I think an answer from the province that they owe us that whether or not they're going to do this and pay for it, or put it back to the taxpayers of the town for Hawkesbury. And if that happens, then I'll put forth a motion to turn it back to 4 lanes, and then the province can do whatever they want.
In the meantime, Port Hawkesbury officials are hammering out the details of scheduled upgrades for Reeves Street over the coming spring and summer. These include the latest additions to the active transportation routes that Port Hawkesbury has been installing over the past 4 years, along with addressing issues of concern on the outskirts of Port Hawkesbury, near the western end of the town, just shy of the boundary line with the community of Port Hastings.
And at the same time, we looked at the issues on the west end. So that's the intersection of Reeves Street and McMaster, intersection of NSCC and Reeves Street. What's going to be the new connection with the AT Trail and Reeves Street, and possible crossings there, and lane markings again, and those safety concerns specifically around those 2 intersections on that side. So as well, even the bigger issue was the reduction of the two bridges down to 1, and the turning lanes onto the what will be the remaining bridge.
So as you're driving into Port Hawkesbury from Port Hastings, there's a small bridge that you take to go onto Granville Street. It's a right-hand turn lane onto a single-lane bridge. There's a double-lane bridge that's not that far from it that crosses that same water course, and so we're looking at eliminating the single lane bridge, and that'll be used for pedestrians and active transportation, and the double lane bridge will be the primary means of getting on Reeves Street, getting on Granville Street from Reeves Street in the west end.
We've asked for that to occur this summer, and that'll match with our AT, and they've taken that back to consideration as well. What we will do is at Committee of Whole, we'll come back with some, we'll show you some drawings and some more details on what was agreed to and what's planned.
So at the end of the day, we're hoping to see some solutions to some of the challenges that we're experiencing. So the road redesign has been, and this is only me speaking, from what I can see, we have a lot of improvements in terms of safety on Reeves Street with the new road redesign, but of course there are still some challenges at different intersections. So we really hope that Nova Scotia Public Works can come forward with some solutions to remedy some of those challenges that are still pending and maybe causing some friction points from a traffic perspective, and to reduce the potential for accidents at those intersections. Not sure what that magic puzzle piece is in terms of finding that solution, but definitely looking forward to seeing what Nova Scotia Public Works can come up with.
And now let's shift from provincial and municipal politics to federal politics. It looks like we're going to have a federal election sometime in the next 12 to 15 months, and when that happens, the Conservative candidate that ran in 2015 for Cape Breton-Antigonish, Adam Rodgers, wants to be on the ballot again. The longtime Strait Area lawyer is the first declared candidate for the Conservative nomination for the new riding of Cape Breton-Antigonish. How does he feel that he'll do, and what does he feel the Conservatives can bring to the riding and the country? To get the answers, I sat down with Adam Rodgers at our Telile Community Television Studios in Arishat. Thank you, Adam, for joining us here.
Well, glad to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's good to have you, and we have a lot to talk about in terms of party politics and in terms of election preparation. It looks like we're going to see a 2025 election date now that the Liberals and the NDP have struck a deal on pharmacare, so that holds up the Liberals' end of the supply and confidence deal they'd struck with the party. That being said, you folks aren't waiting for 2025 to get things rolling with the CPC and the new riding of Cape Breton-Antigonish. Can you tell me a little bit about what you folks are doing to prepare now and what you personally have decided in terms of the riding?
The supply and confidence agreement seems to mean that the minority government, the Liberal minority government, is safe until 2025 when, they have another election scheduled. But that could change. You never know. If the NDP start climbing up in the polls a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled their support and sought an election as well. I know the Conservative Party nationally is eager for an election, and many Canadians are eager for an election, with the Liberals so far down in the polls after 8 years of Trudeau and his government. So the Conservative Party is certainly getting out there and trying to get the message out. The Nova Scotia situation specifically is developing in this way. So every 10 years, the electoral boundaries get adjusted based on population shifts. That report has been completed for Nova Scotia, and so we know where the new boundaries are going to be. Those new boundaries are changing Cape Breton-Canso, our riding, into Cape Breton-Antigonish, and there's some adjustments. But those boundary adjustments don't come into place officially until April 23rd of this year. So after that date has passed, then the party is going to open up nominations, start getting candidates in place, because you never know. There could be an election this year, it could be in the spring, could be in the fall, you never know. Even if it is next year, it's good to have a candidate in place that can get out around, because it's such a big riding to get to know people, to get known themselves, and just get ready for an election whenever that may be.
Now, you know from experience running for Cape Breton-Canso in 2015 that the size of the riding and the various different communities are a consideration for anybody who wants to be the Member of Parliament and represent this area in Ottawa. That, of course, is going to be a consideration now as new communities are added to the riding, Antigonish Town and the western end of the county. So how did that play into your decision to run for the candidacy again for this coming election? Were you a little daunted by the size, or are you ready to take on the challenge again?
Actually, so the riding is enormous. It is huge. It's probably one of the bigger ones outside of the northern ridings in Canada. And so, but I actually participated in the electoral boundaries adjustment process. I presented to the commission in Antigonish, and part of my submission was to say, Antigonish is in some ways a leader or a hub for Antigonish County, of course, Hawkesbury, Richmond, and Inverness, because people go to St. Avex, they go to Antigonish to shop, they go to watch cultural events at the theater, they go to the hospital. The diocese is based out of Antigonish, so there's a real sort of a hub and spoke connection there, and a connection that I thought should have been reflected in the federal boundaries for years. And of course, back in a long time ago, that was the case. So I thought it was a good change. You think of the communities of interest part of it too, which is a consideration for the Boundaries Commission. Glace Bay was in with us in our riding, but there's very little connection between people from Hawkesbury, people from Port Hawkesbury, and people from Glace Bay. They don't have the same interests. They don't have the same media outlets that they're listening to. So I thought it made sense to have the Glace Bay Sydney riding connected, and then the more rural riding. Now, yes, it's going to be a big riding. It goes Antigonish to Ingonish and beyond in both directions. But I think it's a good change because I think the interests are similar. You think of things like the carbon tax. Well, that might not affect somebody in a more urban riding, part of the riding, but somebody who's in Ingonish, in Victoria County, in Neils Harbor is going to have the same thoughts and feelings on that as somebody in Mabu, as somebody in St. Peter's, as somebody in Canso. So I think that's more of a unifying feature, and I think so the riding's a good size. it's a good configuration. The size of it is going to be a challenge for anybody that's running or involved, but in some ways, you know, too, though, it may be a little easier because of social media, and you can do videos and you can connect with people that way. You don't need to be there in person at all times. But I know for an MP that's covering a ride into this size, you can't, for example, just have one office where you're stationed at all times, or your constituency. You have to have a roving constituency office, you know, travel to Cheticamp. Actually, where I'm going later today to Cheticamp, which is almost 2 hours of driving, and you know, you could go another hour and a half to get to Ingonish after that. So it's a lot to cover. It'll be a challenge, but I think the riding makes sense the way it's configured now.
Apart from the miles you'll be putting on your car if you do wind up becoming the candidate for the Conservative Party, I want to take a look back to your previous run in 2015. You finished second to what turned out to be the last term for longtime MP Roger Cusner. What do you take away from that particular campaign that you feel is going to help you this time around and help any other candidate that might become the Conservative candidate? And basically, what do you think has changed between 2015 and 2024 in terms of the political outlook?
I really enjoyed that campaign. The 2015 campaign, it was a challenge because, you know, I was coming into a situation where basically the government was on its way out. You know, the governments in Canada, recent history at least, seem to have this 8 to 10 year window of time. And so it was coming on to the end of the Stephen Harper era. And, you know, I was going to the doors, especially towards the end of the campaign, and it was often the message, okay, great, there's a young guy running. Oh, you're a lawyer. Oh, great, we would love to have somebody like that. Oh, and by the way, we've got to get rid of this Harper. And some people weren't always quite so restrained in their language when they said that. So, you know, I could kind of see the writing on the wall. But we ran a really good campaign. I thought it benefited me in some ways by just being out there. I knocked on over 5,000 doors during that campaign. And so I got my name out there. I got to meet people, got to have great conversations. And so it was a really good experience. We had a good team and ran a good campaign. Thought that we did well in the debates. I thought I performed well in those situations, which I really enjoyed as well. So I gained a lot of good experience from that. Now coming fast forward to 2024 and 2025, the situation is different. Now it's the Liberal Party that seems to be on its way out. The Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre is on the rise, and so it's a much better time, in a sense, to be a Conservative candidate. And you know, that was 8 years ago, and I've learned a lot from it, and I've you know, gained a lot of experience in the meantime too, so I think I'm a better candidate, but that was a really good experience that is going to, I think, hope serve me well in the next campaign.
Now, it's one thing to say that the Conservative Party has been polling well federally in recent months, often with a 10 to 15 point lead over the governing Liberals, and it's quite another thing to say that people will naturally turn to a specific party or leader when a government may have reached the end of its shelf life. I mean, we saw in 2011 that a lot of people decided that the alternative to Stephen Harper was Jack Layton. He wound up winning over 100 seats, and he became the opposition leader until he passed away a few months later. But what makes you feel that Pierre Poilievre is the man to lead Canada, and that he is a prime minister that will actually put his efforts into improving life into Cape Breton-Antigonish?
By the way, I think you're going to see a dynamic similar to that in some ways. I think the NDP is going to do really well in the next election. I think they've carried themselves well in the supply and confidence agreement. I think Jagmeet Singh has a strong following in certain parts of the country, and particularly maybe in BC and out west. But so it'd be interesting to watch that part of it.
Yes.
If the sort of progressive Liberal vote switches over to the NDP in that way. But you know, Pierre Poilievre, I've known Pierre Poilievre not well, but I met him, I want to say maybe 10 or 12 years ago. He was doing a dinner in Halifax, a PC provincial fundraising dinner. And I'd known him from television, and people who have only seen Pierre Poilievre, I mean, he became a politician when he was in his early 20s.
Yes.
And so he would get in these television panels sometimes, and you know, he'd come across as the young kid that was a little too smart alecky or a little too clever or something in these little 2 minutes spurts. Well, I saw him give a speech in Halifax, and he was talking for 20, 25 minutes. I was like, oh, that's a different person. That, like, you see him in this long form, and he's like, well, he has his facts. He is very articulate. He's a thoughtful person. And now, you know, the whole country's starting to see this. He's married to an immigrant from Venezuela. He's got kids. He's, you know, he's sort of toned down his
Sharper edge.
Sharper edge. I think so, right? And that's been deliberate, but he has to get credit for that. And so that's, I think, among, you know, the main reason why the poll numbers are going up. But here's a specific example in Cape Breton-Canso. When I ran in 2015, it was a contested nomination, and so I went out and sold as many memberships as I could in a month or so, got it up to about 500 members, which was the highest it had ever been. When Pierre Poilievre was running for leader, there was nobody in this riding really working for him. In fact, the previous candidate was a Charest supporter. And yet, there were over 900, there was almost 1,000 members. And with nobody putting, like that, this was just Pierre Poilievre's name and, you know, the attraction that he was getting himself personally. So to me, that's a sign that there's strong support for him in this riding, strong support for the Conservatives, and that's a big shift because there hasn't been a Conservative elected in this riding or the form of this riding since 1984 when Lawrence O'Neill, my friend Lawrence O'Neill, was elected back then. So it's a challenge, certainly, but the signs are pointing in the right direction.
You mentioned Lawrence O'Neill, of course, getting elected in 1984 for the old riding of Cape Breton Highlands Canso. And some people would point and say, well, there's Peter MacKay, who got elected in what was formerly known as Pictou-Antigonish Guysborough. But that riding shifted west to become Central Nova and take in less of these regions. So yeah, you're right. Conservatives don't get elected in these areas very often. I remember a frustrated Conservative candidate, fiddle player Howie MacDonald, saying in a debate in 2004, I'm ready to work for you, I'm here for you, and you don't have to be a Liberal to be from Cape Breton. So are you battling some of that? Are you battling some of the deeply seated Liberal vote and Liberal support in this neck of the woods?
Some of that, but some of that is going too. Like I know quite a few Liberals because I'm friends, especially, you know, in your audience here in Richmond County and beyond. There's lots of, you know, Liberal tradition here, but I know, because I've spoken to these Liberal supporters, strong Liberal supporters, that many of them are very tired of Trudeau and his sort of brand of politics and are eager for a change and, you know, ready to support a Conservative candidate. It's an interesting change, too, in the Conservative Party, which is, I used to go to these Conservative events, which I've done for many years, and always be the youngest person in the room, and by a fair margin. That has changed considerably. Like I was in Quebec City for the National Convention, so many young people, it was incredible. And I know, looking at the list of people that are now members in Cape Breton-Canso, a lot of young people that are coming out supporting the Conservatives. And you can see why, right? Because of the cost of living issues, housing, all of these things that are disproportionately affecting young people. I think you're seeing a real change in the dynamic of what it means to be a Conservative voter.
Now, we're seeing, you mentioned cost of living, you brought up carbon tax a little earlier on. A lot of the national issues do have local implications, but I do wonder, are there specific issues that you're looking at for the parts of Cape Breton and Antigonish counties that are represented in this particular riding configuration? Cape Breton-Antigonish it will become in a couple of months' time. Anything that you're zeroing in on as you look at a potential candidacy?
There's, you know, all those issues that you mentioned are very important, affect a lot of people. But the one that I think is a real local issue, certainly to Nova Scotia and Eastern Canada, is the fishery. Fishery, and our current MP, Mike Callaway, is the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, so is involved in these things. I think the fishery is in a really bad place right now. There's a couple of issues. I mean, we saw just last week with the Elver announcement, the announcement that the baby eel market is being shut down because Department of Fisheries can't enforce their regulations. And it goes back some time, right? Because part of the reason is, you know, the First Nations fishermen are out there asserting their rights under the Marshall decision. And it's hard to argue with what they're doing because the Marshall decision has never been fully implemented. So it goes back a long ways, these fisheries and the fisheries issues. So you're seeing problems at the wharf, you know, boats being sunk. You're seeing, you know, this Elver fishery is being shut down because they can't keep it under control. So there's all this uncertainty, and I just think nobody's really dug into it at the political level and tried to resolve these issues. Like, what is a moderate livelihood? Why can't we resolve that after, you know, 20 plus years with the Marshall decision? It just blows my mind in some ways. So I think those are issues that are really maybe resonate more in this riding than they would in the rest of the country. And those would be things I'd be very interested in helping resolve.
All right, so where do we go from here now? I understand that the wheels are starting to move in terms of the new riding configuration coming into effect, and obviously you and the Conservative Party for the new riding will be looking to have a nomination meeting in the next little while. Yeah. What can you tell me about what happens now?
So a few things. I mean, I'm going around to meet with people and try to encourage people to buy Conservative Party memberships. I mean, that's how nomination meetings work. You need to be a member of the party. It's only $10 to join. It's easy to do online. You join the party, you can then vote in the nomination process. And then once the person's, hopefully I'll be the candidate, then I'm just going to go around and meet as many people as I can over the coming months or year or however long it takes before the next election. The other thing that I'm hoping will happen in the next few months is that we'll get Mr. Poilievre to come visit Cape Breton. Like I've talked to the regional organizer for the party, other people involved, and we're really hoping to have him come here and do a rally. He's done a few in Nova Scotia, and they're very exciting events, draw hundreds and hundreds of people to them. And so I think it would be great for him to be here in person, and so people get a chance to see the next Prime Minister. I mean, it's looking very likely to happen, and so I think people would appreciate a chance to meet him personally. So I'm working on that.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing if that comes to pass. And just as we're wrapping up here, Adam Rodgers, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about Mr. Poilievre, who wants to be Canada's next Prime Minister. We are less than 24 hours removed from learning of the passing of Canada's 18th Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. Of course, his Progressive Conservative Party, one of the two that came together in 2003 to form the modern Conservative Party of Canada. Your thoughts on Mr. Mulroney and the legacy that he leaves behind?
Well, Brian Mulroney is one of our greatest prime ministers. Here's a guy who was invited to a place of honor at 2 state funerals for U.S. presidents. And I don't think that's ever happened before and may not happen for a long time to come in the future. Somebody who was influential internationally when it comes to the ending apartheid in South Africa, acid rain treaty, so many things that he accomplished, free trade with the United States. There was a guy who, used his political capital to get big things done. But I remember him as well. I've met him a few times, but the first time I heard him speak in person was when Peter MacKay became leader of the Progressive Conservative Party. Well, Brian Mulroney had been kind of out of the limelight for, 3 or 4 years. But he came back to speak at the convention, and he was on stage for an hour and 20 minutes, I'm sure. But he could have gone on all day. He had a rapt audience. The people loved it. He was funny. I remember hearing somebody, it was a U.S. or British politician, say, this guy, he's so articulate, he's got this great voice, and he can do it in 2 languages. Like, it's an incredible thing. So it's a sad passing, 84 years old. He lived a very full life, and so it's a strong legacy for our country, something that I think other leaders like Mr. Poilievre will try to emulate. And then just his style. I mean, one of the reasons he was so popular was that he always made personal connections with all of his members of parliament. He knew them, he knew people very well, he made strong connections that way, and I think that's a lesson that any politician could take.
And his name lives on at the Brian Mulroney Institute of Government at St. FX University in Antigonish. So.
Yeah, very proud, and I had an uncle that went to school with Mulroney way back when at St. FX, and anyway, it sounded like he had a good time at St. FX, made lots of friends there that lasted the rest of his life, and so that's a good legacy for us in this area too. And of course, he ran in Central Nova. Elmer McKay stepped down and allowed him to run after he became leader. So Mulrooney always felt a very strong connection to Nova Scotia. I know he was a strong, constant advisor to Peter McKay, and they had a really good friendship. So he leaves behind a great legacy.
Well, politics always makes for interesting connections and interesting stories, and we have appreciated not only these recollections, but also your perspectives as you gear up for a second crack at the candidacy for the Conservative Party of Canada in this area. So we want to thank you, Adam Rodgers, for giving us some time here at Telile today.
My pleasure, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Adam Rodgers is the 2015 candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada for the riding of Cape Breton-Canso, and he has announced he is running for the candidacy for the reconfigured riding of Cape Breton-Antigonish. Stay tuned for more of Telile 24/7 in just a moment. And you can see more of Adam Rodgers in just a few moments' time as he joins me to play our infamous Telile 24/7 Fast 5 game at the end of the show. But right now, let's shift from a possible federal election to an upcoming municipal election happening this October. As a matter of fact, in this next segment, we're going to update how you get the chance to mark your X in the upcoming municipal elections. Richmond Municipal Council has already voted to stick with paper ballots only. However, that's not the case in Port Hawkesbury, where town councillors and staff are looking into repeating the hybrid model that they used in 2020. Specifically, paper ballot options supplemented with electronic phone voting for those that wish to use it. So how is that conversation going? Let's check out a recent Port Hawkesbury Town Council meeting and hear all about it.
So there's pros and cons, and the pros and cons are on the telephone electronic voting system being the system chosen for the next election. The other option is to move forward in the manner that you did the last time, and the third option is the going with the paper ballot only. So those municipalities that are using telephone and electronic version speak extremely highly to that. So the drawback of having both system, the paper system, there's more room for error around the paper ballot, and in combining those two systems, there's some challenges with that as well, and the expense of doing that is fairly significant because you're running two systems simultaneously. So that's the information we have.
To get some more insight on the use of both paper ballots and electronic telephone voting for Port Hawkesbury's municipal elections, Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton invited Port Hawkesbury's Director of Finance, Erin McEachern, to give her views on the topic.
I was involved a bit in supporting the returning officer role last election, and absolutely the hybrid is a system that can be used, but yeah, there is a little bit of auditing and reconciliation, I guess, when you're switching from your electronic voting sessions to your paper voting sessions. So it makes it a little bit more complicated, or can make it a little bit more complicated. So just from seeing it and experience, if that's the decision that's made to have the hybrid, it's absolutely a method that would be fine to use. However, I do think that choosing the online based on the information that you have in front of you and based on the experience, the online was significantly streamlined. Results are available immediately. No room for error, no room for, it's a really seamless process.
While town councillors didn't make a decision on hybrid voting versus paper ballots at this particular meeting in Port Hawkesbury, it's expected that final decision will come soon, and all indications are that Port Hawkesbury will repeat its previous experiment with electronic phone voting supplemented with paper ballots. Right now, let's return to a request made of Richmond Municipal Council by Richmond District RCMP. the local police force would like to access data collected by the county from 2 mobile speed radar signs that have been placed in different parts of Richmond County over the past couple of years. Here is how Council decided to go about with that request, and we'll also get some reaction from Warden Amanda Mumberket, including some that might surprise you.
The committee discussed a request from Sergeant Brad Kelly for access to data from the speed radar signs in Richmond County. I move that Council accept the recommendation from the Committee of the Whole to approve the request for access to data from speed radar signs in Richmond County, and further move that staff provide Sergeant Brad Kelly with the requested information.
We know people will tend to go a little faster on our rural roads, and I'm certainly guilty of that from time to time myself. I think we all are. The point being, though, that I think there are some problem areas in our county, and that's the reason we got those signs in the first place, was to start to collect some data about how fast the speeds were being, calculated in certain areas that residents were complaining to us that were becoming dangerous situations. I will tell you that we're very clear. So these devices, they don't collect a picture, they don't collect license plate numbers, it's all anonymous data, it's just simply counts. So if you think about, even when the Department of Transportation sometimes will do a count, you'll see a line, like almost like a cord that you drive over on a road. It's that type of thing. So it's not able to collect any identifying information, it's only information that is statistical and count information. So what that will be able to be used for now by the RCMP will be to determine where they need, if they need to put some additional enforcement at certain times of the day along particular routes. And really, that's why we got these things in the first place, was to make our community safer. And I think, we need to do a good job also of publicizing that information, that, we are noticing speeds coming up. And just reminding people to slow down. No one is going too fast because they have any malice. They're going too fast because of a variety of other reasons, right? So I think the more we can do to educate people on that, and I think will be really helpful to help people slow down.
So far, Richmond County's 2 mobile speed radar signs have been placed typically in the village of St. Peter's, heading eastward on Highway 4 from River Tillard, and along Highway 206 in the entrance and exit points to West Arishat and Arishat. However, Warden Mumberket pointed out that this signage can be placed anywhere that residents feel it might be helpful.
So they're mobile, Adam. So the idea is we will put them up and take them down in different locations as kind of need be. So I think what we have in place now is kind of, we hear from people about problem areas, and then council will consider that. And I believe we're even looking at putting a policy in place to kind of put some structure around that as well.
Well, it's been a busy time for discussions on affordable housing in the town of Port Hawkesbury. First of all, the town has been looking to set up a commercial development district on Reeves Street that would not only stimulate the local economy, but also have leeway to set up affordable low-income housing. At the same time, the town has just been included in a province-wide announcement by Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, John Lohr, and as a result, Port Hawkesbury will receive 1 new low-income housing unit from the province. We're still trying to get details on what this announcement will mean for Port Hawkesbury, but in the meantime, several town officials, including Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and Town Councillor Jason O'Coin, feel that it would be best if Town Council could go to Halifax later this month or early in the spring and set up a meeting with Minister Lohr or members of his department. So let's take you to Port Hawkesbury Town Council's latest meetings to give you a sense on how that discussion is going.
So what he suggested for me to do was to come to council and ask council if we're interested in taking a road trip to Halifax, set up a meeting with the minister's office. Somebody from Municipal Affairs was supposed to call me back before February 8th or 9th, and I'm still waiting. Okay. So I guess I'll ask council if there's appetite for us to hop in a vehicle and try to make an appointment in Halifax and explain what it is that we're asking. It seems like the correspondence back and forth, there's something being lost somewhere. Okay. And so I just want to open it up for discussion to get council's feedback on it.
The first step is to check on the availability of either the minister or deputy minister or senior staff with the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And if we can procure one or more potential dates, we'll pull council to see about a face-to-face meeting in Halifax. And maybe it's their preference, maybe they want to come to Port Hawkesbury, so location to be determined. But I understand the strategy that was presented this evening. Sometimes it's easier and more effective to communicate in a face-to-face manner versus, maybe short and concise correspondence going back and forth. You're able to kind of have a better transfer of information, be able to vet questions as they happen. It gives us the opportunity to go in a little bit more detail in terms of what our thinking is with the development zone and why we believe it'll be a good idea to include, high-density housing projects within that, with those tax incentives. So at the end of the day, it's a potential strategy or tool we can put in our tool belt with regard to increasing our housing stock in the town of Port Hawkesbury and really promoting that type of development in Port Hawkesbury. So at the end of the day, it is another communication strategy we can employ. So if we have a dance partner with the province to be able to meet and discuss it more, then that's the step that we will take as a council.
Now, the mayor made her previous comments shortly after a February 20th meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council that combined the regular monthly meeting and the Committee of the Whole meeting for the month of February. However, when Telile 24/7 caught up with Mayor Chisholm-Beaton following the regular meeting held at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre on March 5th, Council and town staff were still trying to nail down a date and time to head to Halifax and visit the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing and potentially its Minister, John Lohr.
It'll probably take a little bit for one of his EAs to get back to us in terms of throwing out some dates for availability. And when that occurs, we will be planning a road trip, hopefully, to go to Halifax to have a face-to-face meeting with Minister Lohr.
And now, as we wrap up this week's edition of Telile 24/7, let's play our infamous Fast Five game with previous Conservative candidate and the man who wants to carry the party banner in the new riding of Cape Breton-Antigonish, Adam Rodgers.
Are you all ready, sir?
I am ready, yes.
All right, you're all sharpened up, you're ready to roll.
Yeah.
Okay, first, right off the bat, Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
That took a long time.
Well, I don't drink much pop, Adam, but when I'm mixing it with something else, then I'll put Coke in there.
There we are. Now I got you. Okay. I have seen this movie 5 times. I'd gladly watch it another 50. What is that movie?
Tombstone. I've seen it much more than 5 times.
Oh, my goodness. All right. He's into the
Probably
Westerns.
quote it.
Nicely done. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, here's one for you. What is your dream vacation?
Oh, that would be a backpacking trip. Probably, I've been to parts of South America. I'd like to go down to the Patagonia region and the southern tip of South America and do some hiking around there. That's what I'd like to go.
Nobody has ever mentioned South America in all the years I've been doing the Fast Five, so thank you for being the first.
All right, well, there you go. One of the reasons I want to go is that it's a relatively unexplored and untainted area.
Well, we hope you get there.
Yeah.
The perfect sandwich is...
Oh, my. You know what? I like a ham sandwich. I'm not too complicated, but I go for the weirdo sandwich at the Tall and Small in Antigonish. If I'm in Antigonish, I'll eat it's a peanut butter, sprouts, and peppers. Believe it or not. Okay, it's a good one.
I want to try that sandwich the next time I'm at the Tall and Small, so I'm glad you brought that up. Good stuff.
Good energizer.
Yes, it would be. And last question on the Fast Five, would you rather be a forest or a tree?
I think I'd rather be a tree.
Why a tree, Adam Rodgers?
Well, I think trees have some consciousness, first of all. That's part of my thinking. But I think, you get to hang out with the other trees. If you're a forest, you're just sort of an entity.
I like that. I like that. So Adam Rodgers is going to be in the forest hanging out with the other trees.
Yeah,
there we are.
You don't stand aside. You're in among the people, in among the trees.
Well, Nicely done.
Yeah.
Thank you. You are now known. Thank you, Adam Rodgers, for playing the Fast Five with us.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Adam.
And there you have it. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thank you to my interview guests this week, Adam Rodgers, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, and Amanda Mubberket. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour here on Telile 24/7, or you'd just like to make suggestions for a future edition of the show, feel free to contact me directly by phone or email, or contact Telile Community Television in Arichat. And be sure to follow Telile on social media. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.